Welcome back. We are still in Chapter 11, Multi-Step Equations and Inequalities, and we're discussing Lesson 7, Solving Multi-Step Inequalities, and this is the guided practice. So we did some problems together last lesson, and so I want you to go ahead and try to work 1 and 2 out on your own. So all you're going to do is solve each inequality and figure out what x is. So go ahead. I just want you to work on 1 and 2. So go ahead, press pause, work those out. When you get done, press play and we'll go over the answers. All right, see you in a bit. See you in a bit. All right, we are back. Let's go ahead and see how you did. So we're trying to isolate x and get x by itself. We know that we have to keep the 3x together until the very end. So we are going to have to get rid of this -5. We got 3x minus 5 is less than 19. So we have to do the inverse operation of a negative or subtracting, which would be addition. We're adding 5 to both sides of the inequality. -5 plus 5 equals 0. We're left with 3x is less than 19 plus 5. We're going to add that. 9 plus 5 is 14. Write the 4, carry the 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Okay, we are trying to get x by itself. There's a 3 there. The 3 is related to the x through multiplication, so we have to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. So we're going to divide both sides by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 1 times x is x. We have x is less than 24 divided by 3, which is 8. So if you got If you got x is less than 8, great job. Okay, let's move on to problem number 2. We are trying to determine what x is. So we need to get x by itself. We know this is a 2-step equation, so this -2x is going to have to stay together until the bitter end. And we have -2x plus 12 is less than -4. So we have this plus 12 right there. We need to get x by itself, so that has to go first. So we're going to do the inverse operation of addition, which would be subtraction. We're going to subtract -12 to both sides of the inequality. This positive 12 and that -12 are going to end up being 0. So that means we're left with -2x on this side is less than -4 minus 12. So this is a negative and this is a negative. So whenever you're adding two negatives, you know that you have to keep the negative sign and just add the numbers 4 plus 12, which ends up being 16. Okay, cool. So we're still trying to get x by itself. X is not by itself because there's this -2 right in front of x. Well, -2 is related to x through multiplication. So we have to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. We have to divide both sides by -2. Wait, hold up. Did we just divide both sides by -2? Yes, we did. Well, then that means we have to flip that sign. So we have to flip it. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and simplify now that we've flipped the sign. We have a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive. We have 2 divided by 2, which is 1. 1 times x is x. And then over here, we have a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive. And 16 divided by 2 is 8. So there's our answer right there. X is greater than 8. If you got that right, woohoo, good job. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do number 3 together because we haven't done an inequality like this. We've solved an equation like this before. However, I just want to go over how it would work with an inequality. So we are trying to get x by itself. Okay, and one thing that you should see is that they have these parentheses with a 2 on the outside. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the distributive property like we did before with the equation. So we're going to go 2 times this x divided by 4, and then we're going to multiply the 2 times the positive 7. So we're going to do that step first. So I'm just going to go 2 times x over 4 plus 2 times 7 is 14. I'm just rewriting everything else. Okay, so this 2 times x over 4, 2 is the same thing as 2 over 1. And I'm going to multiply these fractions. Now remember, whenever you multiply fractions, first thing you do is look to cross cancel. So x and 1, you can't cancel out anything there. But 2 and 4, you can. They have a common factor of 2. So 2 goes into 2 one time, and 2 goes into 4 2 times. So then after you cross cancel, you multiply across. So we have 1 times x, which is just x, and 1 times 2, which is 2. So x over 2 plus 14 is greater than 18. So now we're back to our two-step equation. We're still trying to determine what x is, and we're going to keep this x divided by 2 together until the bitter end, which means we need to get rid of this plus 14. So we have to do the inverse operation of plus 14, which would be a negative 14 to both sides. So positive 14 subtracted by 14, that ends up being 0, which means we're left with x divided by 2 over here is greater than or equal to 18 minus 14. 8 minus 4 is 4. 1 minus 1 is just 1. So there we have it. We're still trying to figure out what x is. It's a lot better off, but it's not by itself yet. It's being divided by 2, so we have to do the inverse operation of division, which is multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2. This is 2 over 1, and what happens is these 2's cancel out, become 1, and then this is just 1 times x, or x is greater than or equal to 4 times 2, which is 8. So the answer is x is greater than or equal to 8. Perfect. Let's go ahead and flip the page. So what I want you to do here is we are going to do problem number 4 together. Perfect. Let's go ahead and get started. So what I see is with this particular inequality, this side has 2 different x's. There's an x here, and there's also an x here. So what that means is I have to combine like terms. Whenever you have 2 variables on the same side of the inequalities, it's kind of like you do the same thing as you did when we were dealing with equations, with multi-step equations. We have to combine those x's when they're on the same side of the inequality, okay? So, and if you see, remember the inequality, this is one side of the inequality, and this is the other side of the inequality over there. Those are the 2 sides of the inequality, and it's very, very obvious that here we have an x there and we have another negative x there. So we have to combine those. Now, since this is a fraction, the only way we can combine those 2 x's is if we get a common denominator. So that means I need to make this x over 1, and it needs a common denominator of 2. So I'm going to have to multiply the top and the bottom by 2, okay? That means what I'm left with is x over 2. This stays the same because it already has a 2 in the denominator, minus 3, and then minus 2x over 2. So at this point, I'm just really paying attention to this x over 2 and this negative 2x over 2. I'm sorry, I'm going to rewrite this right over here. Greater than or equal to 1, okay? So, and I'm going to combine these. Since they have a common denominator of 2, I'm going to keep that common denominator of 2, and I'm just going to go x minus 2x. Well, this x is like 1x, right? So it's like 1x minus 2x. So this is a positive, and this is a negative. So the signs are different. You take the difference. So we're going to take the difference between 1 and 2. The difference between 1 and 2 is 1x. And then we just need to determine, is it a positive 1 or is it a negative 1? And when you look at 1 and you look at 2, 2 is bigger and 2 is negative, which means our answer is going to be a negative 1x over 2. Or, okay, so that's what it is. I'm going to rewrite this negative 3, bring that down, and rewrite that stuff. So these 2 are now combined. These have combined into this right here. So now I'm writing negative 1x, but we could just write it like this. This would be the way that you would really write it. Negative x over 2 minus 3 is greater than or equal to 1. That's how you would write it. You wouldn't write it negative 1x. I just did it for the sake of conversation. So we are still trying to determine what this x is. And this is now a 2-step, so we have to keep this together right here until the very, very end. And so that means we have to get rid of the 3. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides of the inequality. Okay, negative 3 plus 3 cancels out. I am left with 1 plus 3 over here, which is 4, and I have negative x over 2. Okay? So Now I have this negative x over 2. I'm trying to get x by itself. Okay? And so that means I have to get rid of this 2. Well, how's 2 related? It's related through division, so I need to do the inverse operation of division, which would be multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. So when I do that, these 2's cancel out. That becomes 1, and I have just negative x is greater than or equal to 4 times 2, which is 8. Now, my question for you is x by itself on this side of the inequality? The answer is no. A negative x is not the same thing as a positive x. When you determine what x is, x has to be positive. Well, right now x is negative. So let me teach you a little trick. Whenever you have a negative x and you need it to be positive, one of the easiest things you can do is just multiply it by a negative 1. If you multiply both sides by a negative 1, what happens to this negative times a negative? Well, this becomes negative. So negative times a negative ends up being a positive, and you're left with a positive x, right? But wait, hold up, what just happened? We just multiplied both sides by a negative number, so we have to flip that sign. So we have to flip the sign there. Yep, we need to flip it. All right, so then we have a negative times a negative, which is a positive x, which is exactly what we need. And then we have 8 times a negative 1, which is a positive times a negative, which is a negative, and then 8 times 1 is just 8. So there you have it. There is our answer right there. X is less than or equal to negative 8. All right, cool. So what I want you guys to do now is I want you to do problems 5 and 6 on your own. And if you look here, problem number 6, you have variables on the same side of the inequality, so you're going to have to go ahead and combine those first before you start working on the problem. So where's our friend the pause dragon? Oh, here's the pause dragon, reminding you to pause your device, work out problems 5 and 6, and then come back, press play, and we'll see how you did. All right, see you in a bit. See you in a bit. Okay, we're back. Let's see how you did on problem number 7. So on problem number 7, we're trying to figure out what y is here. So we need to get it by itself. We know that we're going to keep this 7y together until the bitter end. Okay, so we need to get rid of this negative 8. So the inverse operation of subtraction would be addition. We're adding 8 to both sides of the inequality. Negative 8 and a positive 8 cancel each other out. We're left with 7y is greater than 6 plus 8 is 14. Now we're trying to get y by itself. It's not by itself. Now we need to get rid of that 7. Well, how is that 7 related to y? It's related to y through multiplication. So we have to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. So we're going to divide both sides by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. We have y is greater than 14 divided by 7 is 2. So there's our answer right there. Y is greater than 2. All right, let's move on to, if you got that one right, woohoo, good job. Let's move on to problem 6. Okay, what I see is that on this side of the inequality here, there's 2 sides. I have like terms that I need to combine. I need to combine this 4d, and I also need to combine this negative 8d. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that. 4d minus 8d. This is a positive, this is a negative. The signs are different. So when the signs are different, you take the difference. So we're going to take the difference between 8 and 4, which is 4. So it's going to be 4d. And then we look at the 4, we look at the 8. Which number's bigger? 8's bigger, so we know it's going to be a negative 4d. So our 4d minus 8d is negative 4d, and then we just drop down this plus 15 is less than or equal to negative 1. Okay, now we are trying to determine what d is, right? And we have to keep this together right here, this negative 4d until the bitter end, because now we just have nothing more than a 2-step, which means we have to get rid of this positive 15. So we're going to do the inverse operation of addition, which is subtraction. We're going to subtract 15 to both sides. The positive 15 and the negative 15, they end up canceling each other out and they become 0. I drop down this negative 4D, which is less than or equal to negative 1 minus 15. So we have a negative here and we have a negative here. So whenever you're adding two negatives, you keep the negative sign and you just add the numbers. 1 plus 15 is 16. So negative 1 minus 15 is equal to negative 16. Okay, we're trying to get D by itself. It's not quite by itself yet. There's a negative 4 in front of it. How is the negative 4 related to D? It's related to D through multiplication. So we have to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. We have to divide both sides by negative 4. So when we do that, we have a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive. We have 4 divided by 4, which is 1. 1 times D is D. Now D is by itself. Woohoo! Hold up. Did I just divide both sides by a negative number? Yes, you did. Yes, you did. We have to flip that sign. Yep, we need to flip it, so we have to flip that sign. I can hear you guys. I can hear you all telling me over the screens. Flip the sign. Don't forget to flip the sign. Okay, so we flipped it. We divided both sides by a negative number. We have to flip that sign. Woohoo, we did it. Okay, so we simplified that. D is by itself. Now we need to simplify this side right here. And negative 16 divided by negative 4. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. 16 divided by 4 is 4. So there we have our answer right there. D is greater than or equal to 4. Boom. That's it. Okay, if you got that right, yogarigimashita. You did a great job. Okay, let's move on to the next page. I want you to go ahead and work these problems out here. So you're going to go and try working on 7, 8, and 9. Remember, we have parentheses, so you have to do that distributive property first before you start solving. Okay, so we're just going to solve each inequality. So go ahead, pause, work out 7, 8, 9. When you get done, press play, and we'll go over the answers. All right, see you in a bit. See you in a bit. Okay, let's get started on problem 7. So problem 7, we're trying to determine what R is. Okay, we have R divided by negative 6 plus 5 is less than 7. We know that we have to keep this together. It's a regular two-step. So we have to keep this two-step inequality together to the bitter end. So we have to get rid of this positive 5. So we have to do the inverse operation of plus 5, which would be subtracting by 5 to both sides. So plus 5 minus 5, that equals 0. We're left with R divided by negative 6 is less than 7 minus 5, which is 2. So we're trying to figure out what R equals. We need to get it by itself. It's not quite by itself. So we have to get rid of this negative 6. The negative 6 is related to R through division, so we have to do the inverse operation of division, which would be to multiply both sides by a negative number. Wait, hold up. Did we just multiply both sides by a negative number? Yes, you did. You just multiplied both sides by a negative number. Well, what does that mean? We need to flip that sign. Okay, so we need to flip it. There we go. Flip it. Perfect. Okay, now we can simplify. So we have, we're multiplying these fractions. A negative times a negative is a positive. When we're multiplying fractions, we look to cross cancel. So those 6 are going to cancel each other out and become 1. All of this is 1 times R, which is R. And then we have 2 times a negative 6. So that is a positive times a negative, which is going to be a negative. And 2 times 6 is 12. So there's our answer right there. R is greater than negative 12. If you got that right, great job. Okay, let's move on to problem 8. So problem 8, we're trying to figure out what the solution set is for R. I see that there's parentheses, and I see that there's 3 outside of the parentheses, so we're going to have to do that distributive property first. So I'm going to go 3 times R over 3 plus 3 times 4, which is 12, is greater than or equal to 24. Now I need to simplify this. I'm going to turn 3 into a fraction, which is the same thing as 3 over 1. And so I'm going to look to cross cancel. I know that 3 has a common factor. 3 goes into 3 one time, 3 goes into 3 one time. This all becomes 1. 1 times r is just r. So I have r plus 12 is greater than or equal to 24. I'm trying to figure out what r is. R is not by itself on this side of the inequality yet. It's close, but not close enough. So we have to get rid of this positive 12. We have to do the inverse operation, which would be to subtract 12 to both sides. Positive 12 and a negative 12 ends up being 0. They cancel out. We're left with r is greater than or equal to 24 minus 12. So when we do that, we have 4 minus 2, which is 2, and then 2 minus 1, which is 1. So there's the answer right there. R is greater than or equal to 12. So if you got that right, you did a good job. Okay, on to problem number 9. So when we're doing number 9, what I see is when I look at this inequality is that we have variables on the same side of the inequality. We have 3n and we have negative 7n. So we need to go ahead and combine those like terms. So in order to do that, I'm going to go 3n minus 7n. That's the same thing as 3 minus 7. Well, 3 is positive and 7 is negative, so that means the signs are different. So when the signs are different, you take the difference. So we're going to take the difference between 7 and 3, which is 4. Okay, 4n. And now we just need to figure out, is it a positive 4n or a negative 4n? So when you look at 3 and when you look at 7, 7 is the bigger number and 7 is negative, which means it's going to be a negative 4n. Okay, we drop down the plus 7 is less than negative 5. Okay, we're trying to get n by itself. And we know that we have a two-step. We got to keep this negative 4n together until the bitter n, which means we have to get rid of that positive 7. So the inverse of plus 7 would be to subtract by 7 to both sides. This positive 7 and that negative 7 end up canceling each other out. So we're just left with negative 4n on this side, which is less than negative 5 minus 7. So this is a negative, this is a negative. Whenever you have two negatives and you're adding together, you're going to keep the sign and you're just going to add the two numbers. 5 plus 7 is 12. So there we go. We are not done yet. We still have to get n by itself, and it's not by itself. There is a negative 4 in front of it. Well, how is the negative 4 related to n? It's related to n through multiplication. So we have to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. We have to divide both sides by negative 4. So when we did that, wait, hold up. Did we just divide both sides by a negative number? Yes, we did. We just divided both sides by a negative number. Well, what does that mean? We need to flip that sign. So we need to go ahead and flip it. We got to flip that sign. Okay. Now that we flipped the sign, we just need to simplify. So we have a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 1 times n is n. And then we have, simplify this, we have negative 12 divided by negative 4, and negative divided by a negative is a positive. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So we end up with n is greater than 3. That is the solution set. So if you got that one right, good job. Okay, let's go on to the next couple of problems, 10 and 11. So I want you to go ahead and try to work these out. You're going to solve each inequality. So start with 10. And then move on to 11. So where's our friend the pause dragon? Oh, there they are. The pause dragon is reminding you to pause your device. And then when you get done with 10 and 11, press play and we'll talk about and see how you did. All right, see you in a bit. See you in a bit. Okay, we are back. We're talking about problem 10. We're trying to figure out what W is. Now, in this problem, I see that there are parentheses and there's a number outside the parentheses. So the first thing we need to do is we need to distribute this 2 to both items in the parentheses. So we're going to go 2 times W, which ends up being 2W, and then we're going to go 2 times a positive 36, which is going to be a positive 36 times 2. I'm going to go ahead and do that on my side right here. 2 times 6 is 12. I write the 2, carry the 1. 2 times 3 is 6 plus 1 is 7. So it ends up being a positive 72 plus 10 is greater than 32. Now, when I'm looking at this side of the inequality, what I see is that I have some like terms. I have a positive 72, and I also have a positive 10. So I can combine those into one thing because they're like terms, they're just numbers. So I'm just gonna add 72 plus 10, which is just 82. So I have 82, so that means it's 2W, I'm just dropping that down, and that's a positive 82. So 2W plus 82 is greater than 32. Perfect. I'm still trying to determine what W is. Now I have a regular two-step, which means I have to keep this 2W together until the very, very end. All right, which means I have to get rid of this plus 82. So I have to do the inverse operation of addition, which would be subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 82 to both sides. Okay, this positive 82 and that negative 82 cancel each other out. And now I just need to determine what is 32 minus 82. Well, 32 is positive and 82 is negative. So the signs are different. We take the difference. So I'm going to take the difference between 32 and 82 over here. So I'm going to put the bigger number. I'm not worried about their signs at the moment. I'm going to put the bigger number on top and the smaller number on the bottom, and then just take the difference. So 2 take away 2 is 0. 8 take away 3 is 5. So that means the difference between the two is 50. I just need to figure out, is it going to be a positive 50 or a negative 50? So I look at the two numbers, 32 and 82. Which number is bigger? 82 is bigger and 82 is negative. That means our answer is going to be negative. Okay, cool. So that was 0. So I go ahead and write the 2W here. Okay, I'm still trying to figure out what what the solution set for W is. So I have to get rid of the 2. The 2 is related to W through multiplication. So I have to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, which means I'm left with W is greater than negative 50 divided by 2. Well, I have a negative divided by a positive, which is a negative, and 50 divided by 2 is actually equal to 25. So there's my answer right there. W is greater than negative 25. So if you got that one right, woohoo, good job. Okay, on to problem 11. Okay, we have negative 7D plus 8 is greater than 29. We're trying to determine what D is. It's a two-step equation, so I know I have to keep this negative 7D together until the very, very end, which means I need to get rid of this positive, or this plus 8. So I have to do the inverse operation of plus 8, which would be negative 8 to both sides. So I'm subtracting 8 to both sides. Plus 8 minus 8, that actually ends up being 0. They cancel each other out. So I'm left with negative 7D is greater than 29 minus 8. So the 9 minus 8 is 1, and then you just drop the 2 down. And so, yeah, there we have it. We're trying to get D by itself. Okay, it's not by itself. Right now, there's a negative 7 in front of it, so we need to get rid of the negative 7. So how is negative 7 related to D? Well, it's related to D through multiplication. So we have to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. So we're going to divide both sides by a negative 7. Wait, hold up. Did we just divide both sides by a negative 7? Yeah, we just divided both sides by a negative 7. Well, we have to flip that sign. So we need to go ahead and flip it. All right, so once we've flipped it, we're going to flip it. We need to simplify this side of the inequality. So we have a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive. 7 divided by 7, which is 1. 1 times D is D. Now D is by itself, which is exactly what we want. And then we have 21 divided by negative 7. So we have a positive divided by a negative, which is a negative. And we have 21 divided by 7, which is 3. So there's our answer right there. D is less than negative 3. Boom. If you got that right, great job. Okay, so on to our last page right here. Problems 12 and 13. So I want you to go ahead and work these problems out on your own. So press pause. When you get done, press play, and we'll see how you did. All right, see you in a bit. See you in a bit. Okay, we're back. Let's go ahead and see how you did. So we are trying to determine what A is. Okay, what I see is I see that there are parentheses and that there's a 2 outside of the parentheses. So we're going to go ahead and use the distributive property and distribute this 2 to each thing inside of the parentheses. So we're going to go 2 times negative 8 and then 2 times negative 8. So 2 times negative a, it's a positive times a negative, which is a negative, and then 2 times a is just 2a. And then we're going to go 2 times negative 8, which is a positive times a negative, which is a negative, and then 2 times 8 is 16. Minus 15, we just rewrite that, is less than 9. Now, what I see is that on this side of the equation, I have some like terms. The like terms that I see are the negative 16 and the negative 15. They're both numbers, so we can combine those into one number. So what I see is this is negative and this is negative. So whenever you have two negatives, first I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite this negative 2a. Whenever you have two negatives, you keep the sign and then you just add the two numbers together. So I'm going to do that over here on the side. 16 plus 15. 6 plus 5 is 11. Write the 1, carry the 1. And then 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So it's 31. All right, that's what that equals. So we're still trying to determine what A is. Now we have a two-step equation. So we have to keep this negative 2a, that whole thing, together until the very, very end, which means we need to get rid of this negative 31. So we have to do the inverse operation of subtraction, which would be addition. So we're going to add 31 to both sides of the inequality. This negative 31 and that positive 31 end up canceling each other out. We bring down the negative 2a. Is less than 9 plus 31. That is 9 plus 1 is 0, and then we carry the 1. 1 plus 3 is 4. So 9 plus 31 is 40. Okay, we're still trying to get A by itself. It's not quite by itself yet. It has that negative 2 in front of it. The negative 2 is related to A through multiplication, so we have to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 2. Wait, hold up. Did we just divide both sides by negative 2? Yeah, we just divided both sides by negative 2. Well, what does that mean? We need to flip that sign. Okay, so we need to flip it. So let's go ahead and flip that sign. We're flipping it, flipping it, flipping it. Flip it. Okay, cool. So now that we've flipped it, let's simplify. We have a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive. We have 2 divided by 2, which is 1. 1 times A is A. And then we have 40 divided by negative 2. That's a positive divided by a negative, which is a negative. And then 40 divided by 2 ends up being 20. So there we go. A is greater than negative 20. That is the answer. So if you got that one right, woohoo! You are awesome. Okay, on to the last problem, 13. Let's go ahead and do this one. Okay, perfect. There we go. Okay, so what I see is that on this side of the equation here, we have two variables. So we need to go ahead and combine those. We have 1/3 p, and then we have a negative p here. Okay, so we need to combine those into one thing. Now, since this is a fraction, that means we need to turn in this negative p into a fraction as well. Well, negative p, we know that is the same thing as negative 1, right? And so we can make negative 1 into a fraction just by putting it over 1. So we have negative 1p over 1. So that's how we turn negative p into a fraction. Now we need a common denominator. So that means we need, when you have 1 and 3, the common denominator is going to be 3. So we're going to multiply the bottom and the top by 3, okay? So we get that common denominator. So I'm just going to rewrite this because it already has a common denominator of 3, so I don't need to do anything to that one. So I have 1/3 p minus 8, and then we have 3 times a negative 1, and that's a positive times a negative, which is going to be a negative. 3 times 1 is 3, so we're going to have 3p over 3 times 1 is 3, and that's greater than or equal to 4, okay? So we're looking at these two right here. We have 1/3 p, and we have negative 3p over 3. So since we have the common denominator of 3, we can just look at the numbers on top in the numerator and go 1 minus 3. 1 minus 3, well, 1 is positive and 3 is negative, so we can tell that the signs are different. So when the signs are different, you take the difference. So the difference between 3 and 1 is actually going to be 2. And we just need to determine if it's going to be a positive or a negative 2. We look at the numbers, 1 and 3. 3 is bigger, 3 is negative, so it's going to be a negative 2 over 3. We keep the same denominator, and then we put that p right there. So 1/3 p minus 3p over 3 ends up being negative 2p over 3, or negative 2/3 p. It means the same thing. Okay, so we're going to drop down this negative 8. Which is greater than or equal to 4. Okay, so we're still trying to get p by itself. Now we have a 2-step equation. And we are going to keep this together right here until the very, very end. Okay, which means we have to get rid of this minus 8. So we have to do the inverse operation of minus 8, would be to add 8 to both sides. So the negative 8 and the positive 8, they cancel each other out and they become 0. And then we drop this down. Negative 2p over 3 is greater than or equal to 4 plus 8, which is 12. We're trying to get p by itself. And so what you should see is that we have a fraction multiplied by p. And remember, whenever there's a fraction multiplied by p, the way you get the variable by itself is to multiply by the reciprocal. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to multiply by 3 over 2. And this is negative, so this is also going to be negative. So then we have a negative times a negative, which is going to make p positive. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, which is negative 3 over 2. Wait, hold up. Did we just multiply both sides by a negative number? Yes, we just multiplied both sides by a negative number. Then what do we need to do? We need to flip that sign. So we need to go ahead and flip it. Okay, flip it. Okay, now that we've flipped the sign, we can just simplify both sides of this inequality starting here. So I have a negative times a negative, which is going to be a positive. I'm multiplying fractions, so whenever I multiply fractions, I always look to cross cancel first. So I'm looking here. There's a common factor of 3. 3 goes into 3 one time, 3 goes into 3 one time. There's also a common factor of 2 here. 2 goes into 2 one time, 2 goes into 2 one time. So everything ends up being 1. 1 times p is p. Now p is just by itself, which is exactly what we want. So over here, we need to simplify this. This is going to be 12 over 1. We can look to cross cancel. So nothing can happen between the 1 and the 3, but the 12 and the 2 have a common factor of 2. So 2 goes into 12 6 times, and 2 goes into 2 1 time. So now we can just multiply across. We have 6 times negative 3. That's a positive times a negative, which is going to be a negative. And then 6 times 3 is 18 over 1 times 1, which is just 1. And so we don't need to write negative 18 over 1. We can just write it as negative 18. So there's our answer right there. P is less than or equal to negative 18. And if you got that right, yokinekimashita. You did an amazing job. Yokinekimashita. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.